Hey, so, yeah, looks like we are on. How's it going? I do that. I'm a little new at this, yet, so... Hey, how's it going? So I'm gonna play Banjo-Kazooie. I really like this game. It's a lot of fun. I had some, like, I played it a little tiny bit when I was a kid, but I never really passed the first level or two. And I finally played it again as an adult, and I really, really like it, so I wanted to talk about some of the level design and stuff, and just sort of the design choices, and just enjoy a fun game. It's really quirky and cool, and it's got some funny lines in it, and some really unfunny lines in it, but what are you gonna do? So I suppose I don't have to shut up for the cutscenes, because there's no, like, voice acting. And you aren't gonna miss all that much if you don't pay attention to them. I mean, you'll be missing the funny dialogue and stuff, but it's a platform game, it's not really about the plot. So... boy. It's a lot harder to keep this stuff going than it sounds when you're just like watching it. Especially when you're by yourself. I've got to get a co-host because you gotta have somebody to bounce off of, you know. Even really good Let's Players with a lot of experience tend to flounder when they're by themselves, I think. Like for example, if you have the Game Grumps have those episodes where it's just the Game Grump that are sometimes necessary because one of them is out. And God, I know they try their best. They're usually pretty funny guys, but it's just so tough to keep a game, like keep a commentary running by yourself, and be funny and effervescent, energetic. You know, people are social animals. We feed off each other. So. As you can see, I am using the non-premium version of XSplit game. The watermark over there. That's, you know. We're gonna see where this thing goes before I invest. That's a really good laugh sound effect. My son mimics it all the time. This is just, you know... The N64 had a lot of really good sound design, despite just having vastly inferior sound hardware compared to all of its competitors. Like, it's absolutely amazing that music-based games like Ocarina of Time managed to come out on this system. But I guess that probably has a lot more to do with Koji Kondo than anything else. Composer for this game is Grant Kirkhope. He calls in to, it's either AGDQ 2015 or SGDQ 2015. Stivy Bobo runs this game, and there's a call from him that's like, super funny. You gotta listen to it if you get the chance. Kirkhope, he does this. He did the voice acting for, if you've played the game before, there are these flower pots in the graveyard in like level 7. And when you're supposed to drop eggs in there, in the pot, and it'll make flowers grow, and they'll say, "Thank you." It's like a spooky zombie cemetery, right? And apparently the Nintendo censors kept hearing him say "fuck you" no matter how many times he re-recorded it and sent it back. And it's funny because, like, it sounds like a hilarious story, but once you hear it, you can never unhear it. Because it absolutely does sound like that. Just because you know, again, it's not a lossless, you gotta compress audio a lot to get it on an N64. Alright, so we're actually rolling here. I'm gonna skip the tutorials and stuff, because I can't. I'll just show off the moveset as I go. Alright. Oh no. No, I did it wrong. Well, that's okay. We'll do it. It's not that bad. Tutorial's quick and painless, which is always, like, the sign of an excellent game. Plus, you can skip dialogue on the N64 version, so we can blow through this really quick. So yeah, here's Bottles. He is our mole friend. And he teaches us all of our moves that we need to know. And he grants us new moves as we find him throughout the game. He and Kazooie have this really excellent repartee where they just, they're always at each other's throats. It's kind of one of the hallmarks of the game. I really like it. It's a much better way to handle a tutorial helper than, like, Navi, or giant, just like button prompts floating in the air, contextually all over the place. Especially if you never turn them off, Last Guardian. Let's see, so this is the swimming. There's not a lot of swimming in the game, but there's water in pretty much every level. So there's just, you do it in brief sections. There are a couple of watery levels, and as is tradition for video games of this era, they're the worst frigging levels in the game. I mean that with love, they're still fun, but they're just really, like, frustrating, because there's... The swimming controls in this game are not spectacular. The ground-based controls are great, but the swimming is pretty dire. Didn't age well. And even, like, the sequel to this game, Banjo-Kazooie, fixed the swimming and flying controls. They're a lot more manageable in the sequel. Shame about all the level design, though. Yeah, so this is our Beak Bash, I think it's called. It's the slidey move. It's a pretty good attack, but it gets completely and ridiculously outclassed by the Rat-a-tat Rat. Don't ask me to remember that one. Really distinctive name, I guess. We're about to learn it. So he teaches you a few different attack commands. You get the paw swipe. It is the most useless thing in the whole game. You'll never use it, ever. Because it's so hard to aim. Look at this thing. Then you get the, oh no, I think he makes you do this again. Just to make really sure you've learned the paw swipe you're never gonna use. Like, even as a beginner crutch move, it's terrible. Just because, yeah, I guess it's super easy to use, but the forward roll is, like, way easier to hit stuff with, way easier to not take damage with, because there's no big cooldown. And, it's just, you get to do it while moving. To do a paw swipe, you have to stop completely in your tracks, so if a player is just moving around and hits the attack button, they'll do the roll. So the paw swipe is actually harder to use. This is the Rat-a-tat Rap, and it's like 90% of the attacks you're going to be doing in the game that don't involve ammunition. It does stupid huge damage, and it's easy to hit everything with, and it comes out instantaneously. So... and since we can jump, since you do it by jumping, we can do it on the move really easily. As you may have noted, there are honeycomb segments hidden throughout the tutorial section here. They are kind of like heart containers or heart pieces. Once you get 6 of them, you get a new honeycomb section. You get 6 out here in the first area. Oh, I haven't learned to climb yet. Duh. You get 6 in the first area here, which is enough for a new honeycomb, and then there's 2 per level for each of the 9 main stages. So, if you can do math, that is 4 extra hits. They are a neat collectible. Kind of the most valuable thing you can find in every stage long term, but you really gotta be, since they're, you need so many to make one health piece, you really gotta be looking for them, because you will, if you miss 1 or 2, it sets you back by like a whole level or 2, and that's just a huge chunk of the game. And you might think the last one's kind of useless because you've finished the last level, but boy, that last boss fight makes it totally worthwhile. So, let's see, I'm just missing the tree one now, I think, unless, no, I just collected the tree one. Never mind. This is, it's a little new to me. It's hard to concentrate while you're doing 2 things at once. Sort of like rubbing your head and writing poetry at the same time. Let's see. I am sure some of you are at home yelling at your screen because you know which one I'm missing, and I wasn't, I missed it. So, yeah, your various jumps. You got your basic hop jump here. It's good for, you know, what a jump is good for. Your double jump is a little more interesting, because you get the initial sort of low burst of height, which isn't that great. But it does increase your horizontal movement quite a bit and gives you a lot of mid-air control. If you get out over something you don't want to be over, you can jump your way back. And you can also use it to just barely reach stuff that you would otherwise have slightly missed, or you can use it to... There's a ton of places where it's actually fairly interestingly, the game's built around it, and you can... Oh, there we go. Of course I didn't finish this one. Alright, so that's all the basics. Well then you've got your backflip jump, which is a finicky beast, super hard to use, occasionally useful because it's just simply the highest jump in the whole game, and you gotta use it to get to stuff. I guess the shock spring jump is higher, but that's, you know, the highest non-contextual jump you can use it pretty much anywhere. You'll note that when you duck while moving, Banjo slides, and there's a whole art to, like, sliding and then using your backflip at the right time to have the momentum carry you forward, because if you do it from a stop, you just really can't move very far in the one direction, especially if you're waiting to, like, the top of your jump in order to move over because you're trying to grab a ledge or something. So, there's a really finely tuned art to giving yourself the momentum ahead of time and then flipping into stuff, and I am very bad at it. Like, so bad. I consider myself pretty decent at the game overall, but that is just something I'm really, really super terrible at. And the game has kind of a weird habit of putting lips on ledges that completely... It's like you're running into a ceiling when you flip up next to them. And so there are a lot of jumps where you can't just run up right up to the wall and backflip up onto a thing. And that gets really frustrating. You sit there readjusting your position 3 or 4 times in a row. But so the controls in the game are a little idiosyncratic. There's like Banjo slides a little bit if you do an about face while you're running, and things of that nature, but I don't actually think it's I don't think it was a mistake. I feel like the controls I feel like there's sort of an art to making your controls in an action game not perfect in such a way that they're not frustrating, but they add wrinkles to the movement such that you gotta really be paying attention and master the controls for the particular game. But it requires... I think it's really easy to screw that up if you are... don't know what you're doing, and you're just trying to... The fine line you have to walk there requires a lot of polish and a lot of just a fine touch. We're doing a little tutorial area here that gets us into our first level, so I'm just gonna chat a little bit. Where was I? Right, if you just go willy-nilly with it, hold on, phone call. Turn that off. As Walgreens. Anyway, as all you at home wanted to know so badly. Who's calling? Is it the president? Is it RoboCop? I'm not sure if the mic is gonna pick you up on. My wife's in the room. Everybody say hi to Lizzie. Future audiences. Yeah, so there you go. So this level's got a really interesting design to it. You need 5 Mumbo tokens to get the transformation you need to get all the treasure on the level. There are 5 exactly, so if you find all of them, you can do it without backtracking out. First-time players are going to look over here and be like, oh, that staircase is kind of broken, I can't really, you know, they'll try to run up the side of the path, and you slide down, and you're like, okay, so it's funneling me over here, you want to go across this obvious bridge full of shiny stuff to get where you want to go. But if you played the game before, and you've, you know, beaten it, and you know to look for these things, you'll realize, like, oh, it's totally just a place I can flap up to. And it's a much better route through the level IMO. And it is sort of the mark of a good platformer Metroidvania kind of thing, that it gives you these little nods for if you're coming back through and playing, or if you're just observant and sort of paying attention to what the game gives you. But this lets us pick up the butt slam. I forget what it's called, Beak Buster or Beak Bomb or something. The names of the moves in the game lack a lot of variety, so it's hard to keep track. But that lets us get that before we go over to the spot with the chimp, which lets us hit the witch switch on the way. It's just a more... So it's, these games like beg to be speedrun, because there's already an element, like the developers already included some benefits to keeping your eyes open and paying attention to your route and stuff, and so it makes the game a lot of fun to replay, because it's not just about beating the game, but it's about being able to do it stylishly and quick, and so it's fairly good design on that, in that respect. Overall, I'd say it's a very good game, one of my favorites, but I'm sure I'll be bitching about it a ton, because I'm, you know, not great at it. On a global stage, you know. I think, I'm alright at it. I think I've played through it several times, and I've kind of paid attention to the mechanics and level design and whatnot, so I've got a pretty good grasp on it, but I'm nowhere near... I haven't been practicing for years, or playing it 12 hours a day. You will get much better results out of a speedrunner or something, so, I hope that's not why you're here, because I will disappoint. What I won't disappoint with is high energy, just keeping this chat moving, as you can tell. I'm new at this. So, come up here, we learn the Talon Trot, which is one of the more important moves, because it's how you get through, you move really quick. That's not the only use of it. It lets us, first of all, it's hilarious. The run button in most games doesn't do this. Kazooie comes out of the backpack and picks Banjo up and carries him around. And, high-level play of this game, they basically never stop doing this. And it's really funny, because, you know, it doesn't look like she could hold him up for very long. He's he's much bigger than her. And I don't know, the dialogue's always commenting on him being fat, so... pretty much every NPC in the game insults your player characters on site, which is it's a nice touch, actually. Just because it gives some I feel like the default setting for a lot of video games is that you're like the chosen hero and everybody loves you, and you're always going around solving everybody else's problems and they're falling all over you with thanks and giving out rewards and stuff, and so I think it is, at least, it adds some variety that the NPCs in here are usually calling you fat to your face. Or, not to your face, you'll transform into some other form, that's a mechanic. And when you come back, people will talk smack on you after you've left, and they don't realize you're listening in. I don't know, the dialogue's full of all sorts of cute little stuff like that. Yeah. So here's Conga. He throws oranges at you as a boy. That's yeah. So he's got an orange. We need to grab it for the chimpy over there. Everything in the whole game, as far as I can tell, has like those googly eyes on it and talks. And that, I feel like that was just like somebody had the idea to do that for one object in the game, and it was so like they kept pushing it and doing it to more and more stuff. And eventually it was like a running joke, and they were trying to see what they could get away with. Like every single collectible in the whole game, when you pick it up, talks to you the first time. There are, like, all the enemies and obstacles. There are very few exceptions. There are a couple of, like, whirling saw blades in Clanker's Cavern that aren't personified at all. Oh no. That aren't anthropomorphic. Hey, I see I got a couple of people viewing now. That's cool. How's it going, guys? You can hop in the chat if you want, and I will try to interact, because I've got it up. I can see it. At least I hope so. So that is everything we gotta do with Conga. Sorry, I've got some screen stuttering going on over there. It's, I'm still working out the technical kinks on this a little bit. But I'm just excited to have it up and running at all. It was a bit of a journey. I'm pretty tech savvy. I just, you know, I'm really busy these days. I don't have a lot. I can't, you got a toddler, you can't really just devote a whole, afternoon to digging into technical problems anymore. Which is fine. I really don't miss that. I really don't. That was always exhausting. Okay, so this guy, we need to not hit the last head on, because we can jump up and get the honeycomb. And I always thought that was kind of a jerk move. To make. It's easy to not realize it with the camera angle, and I don't know. Just, it seems like one of those things that's just meant to sort of waste your time if you don't notice it right away, and yeah. How many Mumbo tokens do I have? Only 2. Oh, well, one's in the termite nest, I remember that. So, overall, the control scheme in this game is by far the best feature about it. Whoop, too far. It has such a huge varied toolbox of moves, and that's especially if you compare it to stuff that was going on at the time in video games. This has such a huge list of verbs for you to interact with the world in. There's an Old Man Murray article that mentions it, just talking about comparing this game and some others to modern shooters. Modern at the time, it was around, 98, 99. And at the time, shooters, which were the most popular genre on PC, were just like move forward, shoot, and like hit the use key and gather key cards to open doors. So you only had a few ways to interact with people in your environment. Banjo-Kazooie, and especially the sequel, Banjo-Tooie, just give you dozens and dozens of things you can do to interact with the world, and they all do at least a couple of different things. They're useful in a couple of different situations. Kazooie's Talon Trot here is the fastest way to move. It lets us move up hills we'd normally slide down, and in fact, it lets us keep our traction anywhere, not just on hills, so it kind of trivializes the ice level, which is really nice. I used to really, really hate Freeze Easy Peak, and I'm still not spectacular at it, but I learned to like it when I realized that I was supposed to be Talon Trotting everywhere, and it's one of the game's subtle cues to put its foot down and let you know, like, no, you have to get used to using this. Because if you don't, if you can't Talon Trot proficiently by the end of the game, Rusty Bucket Bay is absolutely impossible. And it's just, it's all the advanced movement in the game relies on it. And the Talon Trot, actually, Kazooie's jump becomes pretty fantastic. You can get almost as high as the backflip, the flip-flap jump. And then, you remember me talking about the Rat-a-tat Rap earlier, our super overpowered attack command. You can actually Rat-a-tat Rap while you're Talon Trotting. So, it's the only form of attack you can use while you're doing this. So it's just one more reason why the Rat-a-tat Rap is the best attack in the game that doesn't cost ammunition. Put that up on a BuzzFeed article, somebody. Is it inside the hut? Man, I'm way short, and I don't remember where they are. It's been a little while, not too long. I don't know. Oh, I know one of the ones I missed. I always miss the Stonehenge one. Just because it's nestled way back here. They're pretty well hidden, and actually, I think I remember the other one too. I don't think I hit the witch switch earlier. Oh, a little disorganized. I'm still getting used to this. But it is a lot of fun, actually. I'm enjoying this. So, yeah, as you can see, Kazooie's jump in the Talon Trot. Whoa, I actually clipped up there. Kazooie's jump with the Talon Trot is really high, and so it's kind of feature complete. You can get through most of the game in Talon Trot. You only really have to stop to fly and use a couple of specific moves. But it is tricky to control a little bit. For one thing, you have to keep the Z button held down, which is a pain. Like, eventually, if you play a couple hours of this in a row, your finger will start to hurt, just because you gotta hold down for the Talon Trot so much. In addition, Kazooie's hitbox is actually smaller than Banjo's, and when you're Talon Trotting, so like you have to be more precise to pick things up. That includes the music notes have a really tiny hitbox, actually, especially if you're coming off of something like... A lot of games of the time used really generous hitboxes in order to make up for the fact that the collision detection and whatnot on the N64 is kinda iffy. The game had a megabyte of RAM, or the system had a megabyte of RAM, and there just wasn't a whole lot of free computational power to constantly check a bunch of really specifically shaped hitboxes. So, they used to just give, like, the rings in the coins in Super Mario 64 have gigantic hitboxes. You can be in the same zip code and hit them. And you can defeat Big Boo when you're, like, halfway across the room by just butt-slamming, and you'll hit him anyway, even though you're not even close to touching. And it's not a downside. In fact, it's actually really good design if that's the tools you're working with, right? Better that than being super frustrating and obnoxious because you can't touch anything. And whether or not you hit an enemy is totally up in the air, seems like to you, from your perspective, you know? Oh man. Show you how we screw it up on the easiest level. Nope, that would have been easy to avoid. So, while Talon Trotting, that's the deal where Kazooie's carrying Banjo around on her back. You move faster and you get the bigger jump and everything, but your hitbox is smaller, so you have to be more precise to pick up notes. And that gets really difficult in later stages. They make good use of that, where you want to be going fast and you need the traction boost and you're going to be moving on, but sooner or later you're going to be Talon Trotting, trying to pick up notes on a really thin platform or what have you, and it ramps up over time. So there's really a nice build to it where it gives you a... in fact, overall, not just with the Talon Trot, but just on every axis, this game is one of the best difficulty curves I've ever seen. It's not just a straight up, every single level is harder than the last exactly, but it's got a really interesting ebb and flow to it, and it does have this sense of progression as you move forward. And, yeah. So as termite form, you use it for like 30 seconds. Right at the beginning of the game, and then never again. And a lot of the animal forms are like that, where they are just little... You use them for a little tiny bit, you do one or two things with them, and then you're done with them. But it is interesting that they sort of make you take, especially as a new player who doesn't really know where to go or what to do, they make you take a new look at the level based on the abilities it gives you. So the termite here can climb extremely steep slopes that Kazooie can't tackle even with the Talon Trot. And it's also, it can breathe underwater and doesn't take fall damage. As far as I know, those two are common to every single one of the transformations except maybe the bee. They don't take any fall damage and they can breathe underwater. So you use the termite really quickly, just do that one termite mound, but it's more of an introduction to the idea. We're still very early in the game, and they're just doing a lot of that kind of stuff, getting us used to the concepts. So we 100%ed Mumbo's Mountain, and now we are moving on to the next set of worlds. The first couple worlds, the game is very... it funnels you into the first 3 or 4 in a row. You have to do them, I think the first 2, and then you can do the 3rd or 4th in any order, and then it kind of offers you some branching choices like that, but it doesn't really become totally open and free at any point until there's only 1 or 2 levels left anyway. So this is neat. I want to show this off. We enter from this door, and look at how, I'm going to re-enter so we can kind of see from the beginning, but just look at how the things here are positioned when we enter. We come in, naturally you move forward, move the camera around a bit, so you've got this hidey hole here, which is actually, it is brighter than the surrounding wall, so it jumps out at your eye and makes you, oh, cool, what's down here? And there's this spiral staircase that builds tension as kind of like a, ooh, drum roll please, there's collectibles in here, and then this big guy in the middle of a big room center, like right in the bullseye, so you walk up to him and he automatically springs up and explains what he is and what he does, which is good, because he's real important. You set up these shortcuts and they help you navigate the dungeon way faster when you have unlocked more of them in the late game, which is good, less backtracking. But that one in particular, you need to activate all of Cheeto's cheat pages really quickly. You got the shock spring pad here, which you cannot use yet, and you will actually learn in the next level. And so it is sort of teasing you with something you don't have yet in order to... but it's really clear, it's really visible. And then this thing obviously stands out like a sore thumb. It's golden sand against a sort of silvery white bottom, and just every element of this room pops and ensures that you can take in all of it at a glance with just the second you enter, and you aren't going to miss any of the important things. And it even treats the foreshadowing, right, as equally important. But there's no... I feel like for a while developers got very insecure, and they felt the need to sort of railroad you through this never-ending tutorial that stops you every 3 seconds to hold your hand, and I know that's like the most common complaint in the universe, but it is true. And this is a little more elegant, but I appreciate the idea that it's still a little too obtuse here. There are some things about this game that just are not obvious, even on... I mean, I was on my 3rd or 4th playthrough before I learned how to skip text. So the game gives you some things that are a little... It's a little too obtuse, some of the stuff I try to teach you, and it is, if you get unlucky and just happen to miss something, it can really make things difficult on you later, and then you're operating this kind of deficit of knowledge to begin with, and you could miss future things for that reason. And so there are a lot of people who tried to get into games like this and just couldn't because they are really confusing and difficult at points. They expect you to make these insane leaps of logic to figure out where to go next. Nobody likes that where do I go feeling, you know. Where do I go? What do I do? So this unlocked the shock spring pads. This one here doesn't really lead anywhere, it's just for us to practice with. But you step on top of one, hold A, and you leap super high in the air. I like this little build-up animation here. Not only makes the jump feel more powerful, because there's a big wind-up, and then it finally stretch and release spring sound effect, which sells the build-up and release. But it also allows you to... It adds a whole extra layer of depth onto the jump by allowing you to move before you start charging the jump up. Oh no, we screwed that up. Well, try again. Fortunately, we're still at the really forgiving early part of the game. Oh my lord. Well, let's see here. So, the shock spring, it just, by giving you this jump first, and then allowing you to pick your sort of kickoff area, it opens it up to really interesting uses, which they show off right away with these big stone pillars. Oh, man. I'm sorry, I apologize. It's, I'm not, like I say, not a super expert at the game, or video games in general. I just try to, you know, try to play and have fun and overanalyze them to death. So, we'll do this again real quickly. But I think that ties in a little bit to what I was saying before about intentionally adding a little clunkiness to your movement. Intentionally adding these little idiosyncrasies and wrinkles to your abilities gives you room to add a lot of depth to a movement system without adding a bunch of extra cruft to it, just because the individual pieces function in such a way that they can be used for a lot of different things, and mastering them in different situations takes some work. But I will say, similar to the stone pillars there, or pursuant to those stone pillars there, you have to build your level around it too, right? It has to be intentional. You can't just add fuzz at random and hope to create an interesting move. Although a lot of ideas start in the development process as these weird, just, man, what if Donkey Kong could blow on stuff? What would that even look like, right? And it's sort of baffling to begin with, but then they find a way, they test the idea out, they find out they like it, and they find ways to explore it and kind of work around it. Oh, these guys steal your stuff. They're the only enemies in the game that do that. I forgot about that. I don't get hit by them very often anymore. I'm just here, in front of witnesses. Yeah, so level 2 here is Treasure Trove Cove. I believe this gave many children panic attacks because it plays the Jaws theme and a shark chases you if you go in the water at all. If you come back to the game as an adult, you realize that he's A, not scary, and B, substantially less lethal than most of the obstacles in the game. And so, he's actually merciful. And so I find it interesting that the developers actually take it easy on you at the beginning of the game by making you afraid of a shark, because you can swim around in the water, and try to get away from him as long as you're quick, and so it's actually quite forgiving of your mistakes in that regard. And it's a good introduction to, rather than throwing you right into lava or bottomless pits or what have you, it gives you this safety net, but it makes it scary so that it doesn't teach you, hey, just fall in wherever you want, doesn't matter if you miss your jumps at all, it's just a playground, right? You get the feeling there's danger, and it gets you to feel that right away the second you fall into the water, but it doesn't immediately punish you just yet, which I think is really sharp. Treasure Trove Cove, as anybody who's experienced with the game and watching might know, it's kind of tough to route. I'm having trouble routing it, at least, and I'm not training to be a speedrunner. The game is more fun if you kind of play it efficiently, you know. It's part of the challenge on replaying it, which I enjoy. But Treasure Trove Cove is a pretty wide open space. So Mumbo's Mountain, the first level, gave us this really... Remember I was showing earlier, if you were watching, you might not have been, I didn't have any viewers for the first part of the stream, so I don't want to make any assumptions. But in Mumbo's Mountain, the developers sort of funnel you over to this basic route through the level that teaches you how to play the game and introduces you to the obstacles. But there's another way to complete the level that's a little quicker, and it makes a little more sense in terms of what moves you get in what order. In order to reach it, you have to recognize that there's a broken staircase you can jump to and use your tallest jump to reach it. It's a little bit tricky, so the first-time player is not likely to hit it. So for most players, Mumbo's Mountain is pretty linear to start, right? This level, instead, there's multiple different ways to go right from the word go. You can move in 3 or 4 different directions, and they're all completely different sections of the level. It's not built in a big ring or anything. It sort of is in that there's a central area and then a lot of stuff around it, but you can transfer in between them in lots of different ways. And then there's like an upper area as well, and so there's a lot of, this is more of a sandboxy level. And so I think Mumbo's Mountain, they're still very much in tutorial mode and trying to teach you how the game works. And here they cut loose a little bit, and they let you, they sort of tell you what the rest of the game is going to be like for the most part. And they will swap between more and less linear levels as the pacing sort of demands, but what is the deal here? There we go. So, I guess my point is, I can complete Mumbo's Mountain really quickly, because I've got a good route for it, but Treasure Trove Cove, we're probably going to be wandering around a bit. I might be chasing down the last couple of musical notes for a little bit. But it is an interesting one. I know speedrunners have a really precise route for this level, but speedrunners can also do stuff like grab jiggies while they're still flying to not trigger the dance, and that's really hard. I like to try speedrunner tricks when I see them in games I'm familiar with, and it's a hilarious comedy of errors 99% of the time, as you would imagine. Those are actually super, super hard. But sometimes I'll pull something off in like Mario 64 or something and feel really good about it. This platforming section, the first time I played the game, was really miserable, and I failed it about 50 times in a row. And so it's satisfying to come back here and talk smack and have a lot of hubris and then fall right at the end. Oh no! No, I got through it. You gotta show humility right at the end. That's the trick. Yeah, but it's actually pretty forgiving. You can get back on those boxes really easily. And, but that's a fun thing, too, when you come back to an earlier section of the game and say, like, whoa, they used to kick my ass, you know? But you do it pretty effortlessly because you've just done so much more. But in order to get that sense of progression, you kind of have to do the thing where your moves are a little idiosyncratic and a little weird, and people got to learn how to use them over time. So that's the main thrust of my argument there, which would be much cleaner in text because I could edit out all of the and various. Yeah. The main thrust of my argument here is that a lot of times what we consider to be flaws in a game's design are actually really integral to making it good, making it fun. And I feel like there was a period of time where we kind of lost sight of that, or we didn't understand it yet because we had attributed a lot of things just to the limitations of hardware and software. And it turns out that the actual causes, like some of the things we left behind when we polished everything up and raised the bar of quality, were actually really important to making a game feel fun to play, and giving it replay value. And so we standardized a lot of control systems, we made all of the movement in modern games as polished and crisp, and there are a few exceptions, but they're all considered mistakes, right? People generally... What? Did I not get the flight pad? That's dumb. I went to the top of the ship. I really should have done that. Well, I can do it now. It's right here. I guess that's the other advantage of building this thing the way they did, is you can get to any part of this level from any other part of it pretty quickly. Okay. So, yeah, these are flight pads. You learn to fly really early, which is really cool, I think. It's like on the back of the box, and it's one of the things you would assume they would save for the end of the game. Yooka-Laylee does, which is one of the many, many reasons that Yooka-Laylee is a terrible game that doesn't understand the appeal of its predecessor, which I'd love to talk about some more sometime, but I don't want to get too far into it now. But what I will say for now is that Banjo-Kazooie is actually kind of isolated in its goodness. If you, like, the Donkey Kong Country stuff by Rare was great, but if you go play Banjo-Tooie or Donkey Kong 64, if you haven't before, Yooka-Laylee starts making a ton of sense. They, like, forgot how to design these over time. And so the fact that there was a lot of consternation over, like, oh man, the same team at Rare that made Banjo-Kazooie made Yooka-Laylee, how come it sucked? And it's because a masterpiece is just lightning in a bottle, you know? Even the people making it don't know exactly what they did right all the time, and sometimes it was just a confluence of factors that you cannot replicate. The restrictions you were under at the time, or the unique restrictions of the hardware that cause some crazy thing that actually makes the game better, but you don't, it seems like a flaw at the time, but it happens to play out just right. And I don't know how you could try to replicate that stuff if you wanted to. I actually think that's responsible for a lot of the more baffling... when a game does something horribly, horribly wrong, and it's really obvious that it's wrong, and you gotta wonder, like, why did they even bother? Who thought that sounded like a good idea? I think that's the deal, right? Is that they're trying to intentionally break those rules, but they lacked the experience or the polish in order to make it work. Or just sometimes, even a really good team doing their best job possible, it just doesn't work. There's limited time and money, and you can't keep iterating forever, and people run out of ideas, and people have off days, and... But I think, in particular, just we consider masterpieces to be sort of the standard of quality, which I think is understandable. I mean, it's the same with movies, right? The Oscars are only for your best possible movies, and who wants to pay full movie price for a crappy movie? Same thing applies with games, of course. But I feel like we expect that any team any competent team that has made a good game before could replicate it if they wanted to, and so if they fail to, they must simply have made big mistakes or been lazy, something along those lines, right? But, you know, the same creative team working in the same juncture in their careers a couple of years apart produced Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII, so the incredibly bizarre and terrible follow-up to Final Fantasy VII that is, I think, actually so bad it's good. But my point is that you can go from an absolute masterpiece to something really bizarre and terrible. Same people, same span of time, right? It's not, nobody was in the back huffing nitrous oxide when Final Fantasy VIII got made. It's just that sometimes your really bold, creative ideas really pay off, and sometimes they don't, and you sometimes can't tell until you've shipped the game. Even if you play it, and even if you have your playtesters play it, just sooner or later you're so close to the project that you can't tell anymore. And I hear the same thing about movies, too. A lot of times people don't know if they're making a turd or not. Sometimes they can tell, especially experienced actors, and sometimes the movie's so obviously bad that everybody knows. You know, if you're working on an Ed Wood production, you know it. Or the modern-day equivalent thereof. Rest in peace, Ed Wood. Alright, oh, I know what I missed. I know what I missed. I didn't do the high areas. So here's Snacker. Oh, can I do this? So, something... Oh, he went away. Something a lot of people don't know about Snacker is that you can actually kill him. You just assume that an obstacle like this would be invincible, right? Because he's just there to referee you out of the water. But if you get him up onto the shore... Oh, man. He likes to disappear on you. You gotta be just far enough into the water that he won't go away, and it's really not worth your time. He drops a couple of honeycombs, and I think he'll actually come back if you wait long enough, so... but it is cathartic, a little bit, since he was so terrifying as a child. You just go back and drop eggs on him. Plus, it's just another one of those... Oh, whoa. It's another one of those neat, little... unnecessary touches. Did you see that? That was awesome. Whew. I mean, that was entirely intentional and all. I just didn't think it was actually going to work. Let's see. So my plan for right now is... this is really a test of the broadcast. I think it's gone really well. I'm going to finish up Treasure Trove Cove, and then I'm going to stop streaming for a while, and take some readings, and take a look at the playback, and take a look at how my hardware is doing and whatnot. So, we're nearing the end of the stream for right now. I'm hoping to stream for longer in the future. But, as you can probably tell, I'm not very experienced at this yet, and I'd like to take some notes, and try to improve. I'm sure I'm a little painful to listen to right now, so I appreciate you guys sticking it out. And at some point, I'm intending to get a co-host and somebody to bounce off of and tell jokes with, which will be that will be a vast improvement. I've got some people in mind too, so we talked about it previously. So this area, this looks like, since you enter it through that doorway, and there's a screen transition, it looks like a separate instance, but it's not. You can, if you grab a flight path, or one of the flying discs, you can actually fly up here if you burn enough red feathers, which I think is amazing that they were able to pull that off on a Nintendo 64. Just the fact that there are these big old vistas up here where you can look down and see the whole level is... absolutely mind-boggling for the time it was made. And there are actually plenty of parts of the game where the N64 starts to choke, just because it does so much for the hardware. And these big open environments are part of what makes this game so great, so it is, I think, that solving that technical hurdle was one of the things that really increased the quality of the game. If you had to play this in small boxy environments, or even Super Mario 64, I feel, has a lot of spaces that just feel like rooms instead of real outdoor areas. Of course, this was a couple of years later, and they'd been pushing the technology, so it does make sense. Banjo-Tooie, which requires the RAM expansion, and came out a couple of years after this, is even more ridiculously impressive for its day, but that game's so close to like the PlayStation 2 and the GameCube that it kind of got run over shortly thereafter. I need to do Leaky next. He's right over here. Yeah, we're just about done with the level here. Yeah, so Leaky unlocks one of the coolest areas in the game, which is the sandcastle. This is big. You body slam onto the tiles. Oh, super pro jump here. You body slam onto the tiles to type stuff out, and there's a Jiggy in it for you. But more importantly, the way the game handles upgrades to your inventory is that you find a spellbook named Cheeto who teaches you cheat codes that expand your inventory, and you come here and enter them on the floor. Which is just super, like, rather than just picking up, like, an egg sack or something, I don't know, it's a unique and interesting way to handle it. It is also a gigantic time sink for a game like this, which is why I don't think they replicated, like, nobody really took off with it. Well, excuse me. Talking for an hour straight is actually, kind of tough. I'll have to bring water next time. So if you're having trouble with this puzzle, you can note that it is actually written up on the wall for you. And I swear there's actually another puzzle in the game later on where you have to spell your name and it's not written on the wall, which is just an obvious escalation of difficulty. I have died to this crab way more times than I want to admit. He's not tough, he just has a bunch of hit points. And I sometimes get into a spiral where he knocks me back and I try to jump at him and he knocks me back. Alright, well that is that. 10 notes, 10 jiggies. I'll get out of the level and grab the one in the castle. And then we're gonna call it a stream. So, thanks so much for watching, guys. Appreciate any feedback. This was a lot of fun. I'm definitely going to do some more of this, even if nobody liked it, because I think, at the very least, I know I could get a lot better, so, this is a good time, I'm telling you. This is kind of like what I do anyway, except I'm just yapping at my bored wife about game design, so, it's nice to be yapping at a bored audience about game design instead. Alright. Well, that's all for now. Thanks for tuning in, you guys. See you later.